The mixture is removed to a bowl and will be set aside. It will thicken as it cools. It will be combined with Italian meringue, which is simple syrup heated to 120 degrees and combined with beaten egg whites.
When you're adding the Italian meringue to the pastry cream, try to be as gentle as possible so you don't break it down. There's a lot of air in it.
The pastry cream is piped into buttered ring molds, each containing a disc of chocolate sponge cake.
Just point it with your chocolate. Put it right into the center. Try not to hit the bottom with the chocolate cube. And then adding a little bit more onto the top. You can build them up a little bit higher because as they sit in the refrigerator, they'll lose a little bit of their form, a little bit of the air, and they'll sink down a little bit into the mold. A little bit of powdered sugar on top. A little bit of color.
Welcome to Graham Kerr's Kitchen. It's really two programs in one. This is a series that appeals to your creative side. Food that is sumptuous stuff. How could that be? This is a program about people who want to eat healthy and reduce calories. Actually, it's about food with an aromatic quality that fills the nose. Oh, sure. But it's also about keeping my arteries clean by reducing fat. But it doesn't mean a thing if the food isn't rich and colorful. Maximize the flavor. Okay, but I must have healthy food that I can cook in minutes. I must minimize the risk. So welcome to Graham Kerr's Kitchen, where we get our heads together just for you. Well, and you're very welcome. Do you realize this is the first show? There always has to be one, so welcome. You know, we'll just zip through it together. I've done about 1,000 television shows altogether. We might have shared many of those, but this is really neat because what I want to do is to take some basic techniques, just narrow something right down to a technique which can really make a difference, so as to minimize risks a little bit and maximize the flavor just as high as we can go. All right, so I'll do that and then do another dish after that where I use the basic technique and then be able to extend it slightly so as to give you something that you'll be able to do at home and also challenge you a little bit. And you can say, hey, I could do that, and then develop a dish of your own. Now, that's great stuff when that happens. Okay, this is where I do the numbers thing, and that's where we look at the grams of fat and all of that sort of stuff. And can I take a moment just of your time just to show you this? If we just were to take the human head for a moment and were to sort of put a little dotted line down there, we've got two sides to our brain, and it seems to work really rather well. There's the left hand and the right hand side. On the left hand side one here is the logic stuff. Somebody said, well, you see, I know that my wife, Trina, by the way, my wife's name is Trina, has high cholesterol. Therefore, a lot of saturated fat and cholesterol is not very good for her. So my brain is totally alert to the fact that I want to know how many grams of fat and cholesterol there are, for her sake. So, I mean, that's logic. It also says the word to me, care. To care about somebody. All right. Now, the right-hand brain, on the other hand, is, it's into that good stuff. You know, it smells things, it's creative, it does all these wonderful things. It really wants to please. That's the way I look at it, anyway. So, we call it please. And so, that makes up this word minimax in what we're going to do. We minimize risks because we care, and we maximize the flavors of things because we want to please. So that's the reason why we get both sides of our heads together. All right, this is the first one. So we're going to look at a technique of actually taking a lot of fat out of a dish and replacing it with an ingredient with no fat in it whatsoever and getting depth, because depth is so important when you're doing casseroles and stews and sauces of that nature. Ready for it? Okay, let's have a go. Right. And having said we're going to take fat out, fat in, first of all, just half teaspoonful. It looks a little lonely in there, but that's just as much as I need. Now, thank you, getting a crackling reception. This whole technique really revolves around one ingredient, which is supposed to match my shirt. And this is a low sodium, and you look for these words on it. Check it out that it is. Tomato paste. That's a highly concentrated tomato product. And what this is called is the Maillard reaction. And you'll see the Maillard reaction almost immediately as just stop it down in there. What happens is, in that hot pan, there are two things beginning to start to work together. There are a whole bunch of what's called amino acids, which sort of form protein in that as it's whizzing around, and there are sugars in there. You know, this like sweet taste that you get from tomato, especially in the concentrated form. Now, you see what's happening in the bottom of the pan, how it's darkening. That's not just caramelization. That is the amino acids and the sugars getting together. I mean, they are literally saying, oh, what a marvelous time. You know, the sun's out and we can do all kinds of things. Like a magician's wand, where he gets the wand and says, look at that, and then he pulls it out and it's a bunch of flowers. It literally is like that, because what's happening, and this fellow Maillard, years ago, he discovered that these things would start to go brown in heat together and cause this marvelous aroma to come out. He didn't recognize the aroma at the time, but he did notice the color change. And the aroma develops and develops and develops. As many as 700 different aromas can be developing as we're talking right now. So it's such a good idea to be able to replace the fat and the flour in, say, a beef stew, casserole or something, and you see the fat comes out of the meat and it mingles then, all right, down into the casserole. You put flour in the first place. I don't know whether you make casserole like that, or a stew. And then the fat's held in suspension with the flour and you can never get it out. So you've just got to eat something which is fatty. This way it changes. You don't put the fat and the flour in it, but you do this. Takes about 2 or 3 minutes of just stirring it in the pan. You see how it's darkening down in color? That's just what we want. The temperature of the pan's on about halfway, about medium. Okay, good. An onion. I keep onions, well, let's face it, I don't keep onions. I'm too tall for that. If you happen to be short and cry a lot because you're closer to the onion than I am, then you need to look for some techniques to cut that down. So one of the ways that I've heard it said is that if you leave the root end on, then that stops it. I've tried that one. I've got down on my knees next to the onion and I cried like a baby, so it doesn't really work. So cut both ends off. But it does help if you put it in the deep freeze just a little while before you start the process. And you see how this cut end there? If you cut back in there, that will help you just a little bit in the chopping process. All right, keep that on side for start. And then just keep your eye on the pan and chop the onion at the same time. I want a chop size here really to represent, the best way I can call it is food of the people. I love food of the people. It's called bistro cooking or whatever it is, but food of the people I think sounds right. It means that it's sort of country. It used to be called peasant cooking some years ago, but that's really gone out, and I'm glad it did. It's in chunky pieces, in other words, not very fine little bits. Now, you see what's happened here? Staying on the heat, that's really dropped in color. When you make a sauce of this, and we're going to make sauces of this later on, when you make a sauce, it goes that marvelous mahogany color. That's the only way I can describe it. You get the most fantastic looking sauce. Okay, 1 onion. Now, I'm going to wrap around this basic technique. Now, that's the basic technique, is the Maillard reaction. Now I'm going to start moving it beyond the technique and into a little sauce, because every time I'd like you to have a recipe that you can try in this week that follows, and then, catch up with me. Don't let me get ahead of you. Do each dish each week, and then, on to the next week. Okay, right. Smash the 2 cloves of garlic down there. That's a cheap, it's quick actually. It's also fairly cheap. Way of crushing garlic, and you get it good crushed down, put it down, brown in the pan, and just let that go until the onions in there have softened. Then take this. Now, this is 28 ounces. This is a 28-ounce can. Again, low sodium if you can find it. I'm really hoping that you will, for those people that really need it. But 1 in every 4 of us needs to watch sodium. Then you just scrape up the residues in the bottom of the pan. You see, scrape it up into the dish so you don't lose any particle of that quality. The depth that comes from that flavor and the aroma is just amazing as it's stirred into the sauce. So those are chopped Roma tomatoes, and usually skinless if you can find those. Good. All right, then to let it just go through, I've got some oregano. Now, go through means, in my parlance, get the aromats just wafting through the sauce. Now this, I've got all kinds of marjorams there. This is a marjoram. It's called oregano, or oresganos, oregano, whichever you like to call it. And it's got beautiful leaves on it, and it is the flavor that when you taste it and smell it, you say, that's Italian, you see? So you take a tablespoonful of this, which is chopped up, and stir that in for the 10 minutes of cooking that it takes until it looks just like this one here. So it deepens in color a little bit, but the herbs are in there, and they've really got to mingle and do their thing. Little freshly ground pepper over the top, always with me. Fresh ground black pepper, got that nuttiness to it. Every single thing that you do with Mini Max has to live. I mean, you have to really live the food in it. It's just seasonings, everything, as good as you can get. And now, some parsley stalks. Strange thing this, that there is in the parsley stalk a kind of peppery taste. It's not peppery, well, it is peppery, I said it. It's got a neat texture, really, to it, and a lot of taste. A lot more taste than you'd expect. You'd think that the top of the parsley would have it, but not at all. When you shove it in there, look, see both color, and you'll pick it up when you're tasting this thing. Do it just before you're going to serve it. And then throw in also another tablespoonful of fresh oregano leaves. Just pick the leaves up. This means that you've got to start growing a herb in your kitchen. And you say, that's too much for me. Oh, rubbish, If you've got any kind of room which faces south, and if you've got a square house, I guess you've got something like that, then just put a little pot out, marjoram, go and get a herb start thing and start it. Get it off, and you'll be amazed. All right, so that's nice. Now, one thing that you've got missing from that is oil, frankly. And oil is where the classic forms. So what I've done here, I've taken a tablespoonful of arrowroot, of pure starch, the arrowroot. Mix it up with just a little water, and then pour it down into the sauce here and stir it up. Now what happens here is, and it doesn't take much to get it stirred up and cleared away, is that it actually glosses it. It gives it the most, when that clears out, it gives it the most incredible gloss. And it's so glossy that you would, for all that you can imagine, you'd say, boy, that's got a lot of oil in that one. But it doesn't have a spot. And so that is a very useful technique at the end. We'll get into that one later on, but as another technique. But there it goes. There's the sauce. Now, come through and we'll have a look and see how the numbers go, you know, in comparison with the classic Italian sauce. And we can see how this one looks. It looks nice, it's crunchy, it's got a nice gloss on it, and looks good. So I want to, in everything I do, Minimax, I'm going to put aroma and color and texture into food. But let's compare this. Now, this is being compared with a classic Italian sauce, all right? And just the sauce, nothing else in it. So 178 calories, and this one then that we've just done is 66 calories. So, well, there's something off the top. 14 grams of fat. This is where it's very important. This is down to 1 only gram of fat. And the amount of saturated fat that normally goes into it was 2, and this one is a big fat 0. So therefore, the sauce, which is 70% of its calories coming from fat in this case, I've got that to 16% of calories coming to fat, which is really good news. There's 0 cholesterol in both of them because they use monounsaturated oil. And the sodium is 851, and that's down to only 33 because of the low sodium products, if you can find them. And then the dietary fiber is 3. And we get on to more about fiber later on. Okay, let's have a look. So we're looking for aroma, color, and texture. So the aroma is very clear there, and the color is gorgeous. See about the texture. Oh, that's really nice. It really feels Italian, you know? Got all of those elements together, but without that fat content. Okay, so do you like that idea? The idea now is to springboard, to bounce up and down on that idea and do something different. Well, just on this occasion, what I'm going to do is take the basic sauce and create a chicken dish with pasta in, say, 20 minutes. How's that? You know, had a busy day and rush home, and that's what you want, right? Come on, let's have a go. I do hope you like that music. Right, here then on the pan, hot boiling water, sauce on the side. This can really be made in about 20 minutes. You might like to, by the way, double up on the sauce that I did earlier and stick some in a plastic bag and whack it in the deep freeze and then just resuscitate it. I mean, that's one way you can make it even quicker. Okay, chicken. Chicken breast, skin on. Not so easy to find nowadays, but 6 ounces in total when they're actually, you know, with the skin on. Although you can't really make much of a fuss about that either. I mean, it's all there for you. You can't say, well, I want them with 6 ounces and start opening all the packages. But at least know that the numbers and how we've done that is based upon 6 ounces. All right, what I do with this is just get a hold of those and just wipe them around the bottom of the pan with just 1 teaspoonful of oil. And the oil is always a mixture of olive oil and just a touch of sesame oil with that as well. Yeah. So just seal it on both sides, drop it in. Takes about 8 to 10 minutes to cook a chicken breast on medium heat. Great. Okay, so whilst that's going on there, let me just show you this. I always put a lid on top of a pasta water so that it's vigorously boiling to get the pasta in. Now here are the various choices you've got. You've got the pasta which is made fresh on the day. This is a spinach pasta, and this very good, probably cooks in 3 minutes. This one is sort of fresh, and it comes in a sealed plastic package. Every store has it. And this is very good, very high quality, and, you know, 4 minutes. Now, this is the dry that you can get. You can still do excellent quality pasta. And this one here is going to take 11 minutes to cook. So you're going to have to, if you're that concerned about time, please don't be that concerned about time. If you just don't have it and you feel like pasta, then have some dry pasta at home and keep it on hand. Pasta's a great thing. Okay, so we just turn that over. Keep turning it over during the cooking process. roughly boiling here, and take two ounces. For one person, you need 2 ounces of pasta. Drop it down, slightly salted water, not aggressively so. About 1/4 teaspoonful of salt would be enough, just to the slight. And then put the lid back on again in order to bring that up to a vigorous boil, and then start counting the time from there. That's about 4 minutes, so let's see roughly whether that works. Good. Okay, once again back here. Now, chicken breast may sound a little expensive, maybe. Let's try and do some chat about just how expensive it could be. If you buy chicken breast just straight in the packet, just like that, just leer down at them, they've usually got the skin off nowadays because they just want to tell you, hey, skinless chicken breasts are great. They're not great because they should have the skin on. It actually makes it easier to get more moisture into the breast. We'll deal with that one later on. But here, have a look at this. Here's a 3.5 pound chicken. And out of a 3.5 pound chicken, you can get about 1 pound of meat, all in all. And this is how it works out. You might need, by the way, to invest in a knife, which is a thin bladed knife like this, so as to be able to get the meat off the bone. Once you've done one, you can do 100. You get the chicken breast, and you get it with the skin on. You get the wings, if you want to deal with those, or the wings can be placed with the carcass for stock. And you've got the leg and the sides as well. So you've got 2 meals, you know, well, whichever way you like to look at it, but stock. Magnificent chicken stock out of that. So I think you'll save anywhere 15-20% of the cost of the chicken, you know, if you know, against buying a whole one against buying the breast. All right, good. So this is then turned over the other side. Now you see how it's beginning to color up a little bit. Never, it really doesn't have to be at you know, max, well, mini-max, but hold it just 1 second. You see what's happened here? If you look down through there, see the froth and, coming past the pasta? Well, what happens if you leave the lid on is that you get an overboil, and this starch roars all over the top of the stove, which is not a good idea. So when it comes to the boil, lift the lid and disturb it a little bit. Just turn it around, make sure that it's cooking and it hasn't stuck to the bottom anyway. All right, so there we go. Let's turn this once again. That interrupted me from there. You see, this is so fresh and so bouncy, and because the skin is there, what moisture would have come up through the breast and then atomized, and then the chicken breast shrinkles up like this. Now you've got that sheet of skin on the outside. It's just great for keeping the moisture in. Okay, turn it once again. Great. All right, now, let me see. Just got one thing going here. The pasta is almost ready. I've got 1 minute to go on the pasta. This is a very good technique. Get a colander, which is quite a large one, not a plastic one. If you get a plastic one, it'll warp and become a modern sculpture before you know where you are. Stick it in the oven, that's the sink, and then lift it up when it's just at that point, just before it rings. It'll ring in a moment. And then pour that almost all the way. Just save some water in the bottom. Pour that water into a bowl like that. Can you see the color of that? That's the spinach, you know, coming out. And then place that on top. Now, it's not sitting in the water, but if you put a lid on the top there like that, there's some holes in there. But this will keep, thank you, this will keep it just perfectly so that it's al dente when you finish the sauce and do the rest of it. Good. All right, out you come. Here, when it is almost done, just simply take the skin and always go from the bottom upwards. This is the bottom, the narrow end, and strip it up and pull it off and drop it over, just like that. Okay, strip it off, pull it over, and turn it. And those will then be just grand, just as you finish off that second side. See how that nice color has come up on that? Good. When it's had the 8 minutes, you then just lift them out of the pan, 8 to 10 minutes, just press them to make sure they're nicely done. And then you'll find that there's two things in the bottom of that pan. There's a certain amount of residue. There's very little residue in this one. Got a small bit of fat there. But you have got fat. So you've got some residue which I want to get hold of and look after. And this, now that I never throw out. I put that into a plastic bag and use it as a fire lighter. It's the most incredible stuff. Just 1 or 2 fires it does, but it's wonderful. And then take 1/4 of a cup of Chardonnay and deglaze the pan. Just shoot that into the pan, run it all down there like that, and then take the sauce and add it to that fresh flavor of wine that you've got from it, and then drop the chicken breast back in there again. Just nestle it down. Almost done. Just throw a few fresh oregano leaves on the top, and then out with the pasta. A nice dish, please, you know, hot dish, hot food, hot dish. And one of these interesting little pasta spoons, which you can get up the right kind of pasta for the dish. It's a useful piece of equipment. And then here, just select the chicken breast, place that on the plate there, and a good spoonful, actually the sauce can go on first if you prefer, and just a good spoonful of that sauce goes there, and always keep a piece of, just let it come through. Don't smother it. Always keep a piece of paper handy. Right. Whoa, looks nice. Just to be able to sort of clean off the side of the plate. Look at this, look. Don't cut down trees. Right, ready? Come along, let's have a look at the numbers. There it is. Now this is the classic here, and this is Jeeves. That's the old butler who's bought this is not the classic. This is mine. This is the Minimax, and this is Jeeves, by the way. He's a nice fellow. And this is Sigmund, and Sigmund always brings along the other dish, which is the classic, and it's a great dish. It's a great fettuccine and a cream sauce with chicken, and marvelous dish. Never would I say anything against them, but this is the face-off where we're going to look at it now. In the classic is always in red, and the Minimax is always in green. So 614 calories goes down to 465. The fat goes from 30 down to 10 grams of fat. Saturated fat level was 17 in that, is 3 in this one. The percentage of calories from fat was 45 in the total dish, and this has come down to 20% of calories from fat. You might have heard, you know, the American Heart Association says 30% of calories from fat for really healthy folk. Okay, well, that's what that's about. That's 20%, so it's under. Cholesterol, 174. We've got that in at 141 from the chicken. Sodium was a whopping 1,244. This is down to 498. You might need a little salt. When you taste it, you find out. And then dietary fiber, 4. This goes up to 6. I always get thrilled when I see that. Okay, I love it when it goes up. Now, take these off, otherwise I tend to get them steamed up. A little bit of the chicken, and there. Oh, nice. Quick enough for you? Come back after a hard day? Hope so. Don't forget, minimize the risk, maximize the flavor at the same time, because you want to please and care for people. Thanks for being with me. God bless you. See you next time. Bye. Welcome to Graham Kerr's Kitchen. It's really 2 programs in 1. This is a series that appeals to your creative side. Food that is sumptuous stuff. How could that be? This is a program about people who want to eat healthy and reduce calories. Actually, it's about food with an aromatic quality that fills the nose. Oh, sure. But it's also about keeping my arteries clean by reducing fat. But it doesn't mean a thing if the food isn't rich and colorful. Maximize the flavor. Okay, but I must have healthy food that I can cook in minutes. I must minimize the risk. So welcome to Graham Kerr's Kitchen, where we get our heads together just for you. Thanks so much for being here once again. This is a program where we're going to look at meat as a pioneer portion or something that's modern. And let me try and explain that to you. Come over here for a moment, because really it's something which is, are you like this? Do you look at things and say, I like the size of that? You know, for example, if you're buying a car or something like that, do you like cars which are huge or small? Because we're downsizing nowadays. What if we downsized as far as food was concerned? You know, in the early days, pioneers came here, and unquestionably, because there was a lot of meat around and because there was a lot of hard labor happening, a kind of stew would have easily that amount of pieces, chunks of meat in it. And say, well, some of the older recipes, mine included, by the way, suggested that 2 pounds of meat would go for 4 people. So you get 8 ounces of raw meat would go to be able to make one. Okay. Well, now, what if we were to actually take one piece of meat and make it into a larger piece and then make a stew of it, say? It's all in the visual. It's all in the eyes, really. And if just serve that up in a sauce, well, I don't think we'd go very far at all. Well, there's a certain amount of vegetables used to go in the old stew, but in this case, a great deal more vegetables and, you know, both oranges and greens, all kinds of colors, would go to support that. So, in fact, the meat would no longer be the star of the issue. It would just be part of the cast. Now, in this particular case, you would go down to only 2 ounces per head. So if you were to actually drop the total meat content down to 2 ounces, do you know what would happen? It would be wonderful in terms of the reduction of risk because of fats and things like that. But it could also save you, for a family of 4, up to $1,000 a year. Want to see how that works? Come along, I'll show you. So much of what we're going to do today is going to be visualization. You know, we're going to see different things of different sizes. So let's dive in, first of all, and look at these two here. Now, these are both brown stews. They've been made by radically different methods. Here is the standard kind of stew thing. You notice what's happening here. We've got a good rich stew with lots and lots of meat in it. Looks wonderful. It's been made with a roux on the base, which is really the butter and the flour mixed together. And what fat there is in that sauce, that is glistening. What you see is glistens. That's fat. I mean, it's just terrific stuff, wonderful. And there's small pieces of meat just nestle in it like so. Now, if I can dig out a piece here, what I've got here in the same spoon is really, and let's bring that spoon over to that one so we can see it closer. I've got slightly more brilliant look to it because then there isn't so much of the, you know, the fat in it. And I've got a lot more vegetables, and I've got a larger piece of meat than I've got in the others. Do you see? Okay. Well, let's see how this all works. Let me show you the 2 pieces of meat and the decision that I would make if I were you, if I was going to pull back on this one. Here is a piece of meat which would be, you know, this is called chuck steak, and I think that this would be the typical kind of meat that would be recommended for a stew because it has lots of connective sinews in it, and it's well marbled, it's got good fat running through it, you see, and that's what you'd look for before. And that would be a 2-pound piece of this for 4 people, is what recipes said. My recipes have said that prior to 1970. But I'm going to suggest to you that you go to a different cut of meat, which is this one here, and this is bottom round. Now, top round has a little less fat in it, and eye of round. But this one I prefer. It's got a little bit of fat in there, just enough to make it moist. And so this is the quantity I would use, 8 ounces for 4 people, instead of that huge visual size. Well, what do you do with that? You know, I mean, surely it's got to look mean, but it doesn't have to look mean because look at these two. Here is a portion made with the meat. You see the amount of meat that you've got here, 8 ounces, and the vegetables in support of it. But when you go to this one, which has only got that 1 piece of meat in it, that 2-ounce piece of meat, now what you have to do is you've got here so much more vegetable that goes with it. And there's another factor as well. And that is, remember I said at the beginning that we got a roux in the thing, that we actually made the sauce from a roux? Well, this is a roux. It is fat, butter, normally, and flour, almost in equal quantities. And if you add up the sum of the total and then multiply by 6, that's the amount of liquid that it can actually contain and hold. And it's wonderful. I mean, to get it has a gorgeous flavor. But in this stew, all the fat is held in suspension. It's just held up in there. Gorgeous, but very fatty and very rich. In this one here, I don't have that at all because it's thin. That liquid is thin, and I have to thicken it somehow. So let's look at the way that you would finish off a sauce stew like this one. This one's ready to go. I'm going to sprinkle some peas in there, about half a cup of peas, and they look great. It immediately lifts that instead of it just being sort of bland. And this one, I'm going to add the same thing, but just before I do, you see this? You see that I've got here 2 eggs. Now, and just for effect, this needs to be seen. There's 2 cups of peas there and 2 eggs, and we talk a lot about protein. These are 6 grams of protein each. Each one of those eggs is 6 grams. And a cup of peas is 7 grams of protein. And that's true. So when you take these 2 cups of thawed peas, which I would add at the last moment, and just stir those in, you're in fact adding as much protein as breaking 2 eggs into the thing. Great. Good. Then some mushrooms. Now this is key when you're doing a stew of this nature. Have a look at this. If you take a mushroom and you cut it like this, which is the standard way that I cut a mushroom, so that you've got to a good texture and appearance to it. Now, drop those in literally almost before you're ready to serve. I've got about a dozen mushrooms there, and now you just simply turn the peas and the mushrooms. Look at it. Look at the textural. Look at how it looks visually. Somehow now you've got so many things going on that you don't quite notice the fact that you've got less meat than you might be accustomed to. But 2 ounces is a small portion. Okay, so we're bringing the heat up underneath there, and this is the last bit. Instead of that glossiness that we got in this stew here, which is very glossy and comes from fat, we're not going to get that with this technique. I'm going to pour 4 tablespoons full of de-alkalized red wine. I like that in the stew. If you don't want to use that, that's fine. Just use beef stock, and that would be just great. And I prefer that to water. And then mix this up with arrowroot. There's 2 tablespoons full of arrowroot for an average size dish of this nature. See how it's just beginning to bubble up there? Push it off the stove. Hot, isn't it? And just pour that in. Always take it off the stove before you pour it in, and then pull it back, because it can hit the bottom of the pan and clench up quickly, you know, the starch in it, and it makes little dumplings, and that's not such a good idea. Now, you see, as you turn this, something's going to start to happen right before your eyes. It's going to start glossing. Do you see how that is beginning to gloss up now? That starch instantly thickens, and believe it or not, but, well, I'm sure that you would. Believe it or not, this is a strange statement to make. What happens to this is that the mushrooms are glazing and cooking at the same time as the peas are heating through, and you're ready to serve it. Now, that really works. What I'm going to do is just to show this in a... Have you ever been to one of those kind of bistro places, you know, restaurant thing? And you have a really nice-looking sort of stew, and they serve it in one of these sort of dishes. Have you ever had that? I think it's a great way to serve something, but you need to put it on a serviette underneath so it doesn't rattle all over the spot. And if you do that, it's very difficult to clean the plate. So always put that down, pick up a plate to sort of save yourself, and then get hold of your portion. And this is a good idea, actually, for ordinary plates and ordinary things. Look at how that looks. I've got room for just a little bit more. And the mushrooms, you can say to me, Graham, they're not really cooked. And I'm saying, you see, have you ever had raw mushrooms, okay, raw mushrooms, in a salad? Well, okay. These are heated right through, and they've got this terrific marvelous texture to them. Have a look at this. Stew is one thing, and you can see it looks great. Now, here. Here is the problem when you apply it to a steak. This steak is a steak called a London broil, or flank steak. So just spread it on there and get the garlic on the top and just sort of spread it on there, and I'm going to massage that in just a moment. On this plate, just a little touch of oil, just a little bit. And then some freshly ground salt over the top, just not too much, and freshly ground pepper. You're actually seasoning the plate. And then, after you've massaged in the garlic onto just really one side, and then pull it to one side. You can't have pieces of garlic on the outside of the steak. If you do, they'll burn, and it won't look good at all. So then just simply drop it down and run it around the plate. Right? And what you've got is you gradually, as you turn it backwards and forwards, you are completely seasoning that piece of meat ready to go. There's a little bit of garlic there, won't hurt. Okay, then drop it down into the pan, which is on the heat there. That's on just medium. I don't believe any longer in my life of cooking things flat out, full bore. Just medium to medium low, gentle cooking, wonderful texture. Doesn't tighten all the sinews up. This is a tenderloin. Now here's the other piece, and I'm doing this so that I can give you the visual of a flat piece of food on a plate and the visual of a high piece that stands up on the plate for steaks, because there's different problems. Right? This is the tenderloin, which is kind of the king of all steaks and has little bits of trim that need to come off it. But I want to cut a piece which is about 8 ounces, and hopefully that's about 8 ounces. I've got little scales here, and I just can never see whether it's on or not. Ah, it's on. All right, what have we got there? 7. Huh. Well, nearly 8. That's the Scottish in me coming out. All right, just wipe that in the same seasoning as before, and you don't need to put oil in the pan, and just drop that down in the pan. I want to cook that up before, just as we go and have a look at the numbers. All right, put that over there. Get that out of the way. Everything cooking nicely? Great. Let's go and have a look at this and compare these numbers, all right, with the way that it would be if I had the whole of that, you know, the one that I've been showing you before. Now, looks good. I think just a dab of parsley on the top would look great. And what I was trying to do here is to make it look reasonable with all the added vegetables, and yet only be a 2-ounce portion instead of all these pieces and being 8 ounces. So I hope I've done that. Let's have a look and see what it looks like in terms of numbers. Now, because you've got a lot of vegetables in here, and potatoes are part of it, I've got 576 in terms of calories, which is, the whole meal, everything in one pot. Fat was 22.7 in the classic. This is right down to 4, which is very good. And so saturated fat is only 1 gram of that 4 is saturated. This pleases me. Now, this really pleases me. This stew, which shows you that a good, well-made stew can still just about fit the American Heart Association guideline, which is 30% of calories from fat. Now, look at this. 6%. Truly wonderful. I mean, this thrills me. Cholesterol, 118, is dropped down to 47. Sodium is 497, which is perfectly okay. And dietary fiber is a whopping 17. And that shows you what you do when you make the exchange between the high price of meat and the lower price of vegetables. You're actually going to get a tender piece of meat, you see, because the larger the piece, you have to attack it with a knife and fork. You can add other ingredients to it, you see. Oh, that's so good. I don't think it's mean at all. Let me just taste up the mushroom. Such texture. When you get that, you've got the chewiness of the meat, and then you've got this texture of the mushroom, which just adds to the whole feeling of the textural side of it. Okay? Okay. Well, there's the concept done for a stew. Now, we're going to go back and look at how steaks work, because steaks are not as easy to do as this is. You ready for it? Okay, come on. Let's have a go. Okay, well, everything seems to be doing fine here. Let's have a go at it. Steaks are a little bit more difficult, because when you start to get down to it and you look at a tenderloin steak, you remember the one that was cut that thick, you know, that I put in here now? And that's about 460 calories, all right? And the one I'm going to cut here is 117. Now, oh, I can hear you say, come on, you're joking. But I'm not. That's about 2 ounces. If you're going right down to 2 ounces, you could go up a little bit, to about 3.5, 4 ounces. But I wanted to show you in 2-ounce pieces. What I do is just pound that down a little bit, so that, in fact, something like this little ramekin dish would be almost exactly the right size for that. And there's a reason for that. Okay, down into the same seasoning before. Just slosh it into the pan, drop it down by its little mate, which is doing fine now, and just seal it on the one side and just flip it on the other side. That's right, and it won't take a moment or two before that's going nicely. All right, here's the London broil, which is sizzling away nicely there, and the pan's got all the juices down. What I would do with a tenderloin is this. I'd take a whole onion, that size, and a clove of garlic, and I'd fry that in a little, chop it fine and fry it in a little oil, and then throw in half a cup of mixed rice and a quarter of a cup of barley and a quarter of a cup of wild rice, a little salt and pepper, and some fresh herbs on the top, just some thyme and parsley and a couple of bay leaves, right? And then put that into a casserole dish at about 375 degrees Fahrenheit, 190 degrees centigrade, and leave it there about 45 minutes. And when you bring it out, you'll just be able to get hold of the herbs and just dispose of those. They will actually have gone down and into the dish perfectly. And then get this little ramekin dish, the one that we used as the measure, and get up the pilaf. Now grease it just gently first of all. Gently. How do you grease a thing gently? I mean, just a little bit of oil in the bottom, and press it down really tight. Get enough in. Don't make it brim full, but press it down tight. Now, if you do these for each person that you're doing, it's half a dozen of these little ramekin dishes. They're very useful for custards and other things. So you can put those in a baking dish, stick them on a rack, and put them in the oven, and then you've got it all ready, for a dinner party when you're ready to serve. You just grab a hold of it like this, turn the steak over another time. Oh, looks nice. And then just drop that. Of course, it'll be hot at the time, but you could put a cloth over it. And then just give it a little sharp tap. That's the reason for the little bit of gap that we left behind. There you are, see? And it comes off, looks wonderful, and that is used as a sort of lift up of something which is very thin. You see? Now, very thin, you can drape that on the top. And then take fresh vegetables there, lovely pieces of broccoli, and a good hunk of those who've got, they're bright orange, they've got to be carrots. All right, and that's the start. That's almost ready to serve. All right, let's put that on one side. Now here is the steak before. You see how that steak looks like that now? The whole idea is to bring it up and to give it that sort of the height a little bit, and then vegetables on that one as well. I wanted to not just compare it dully, but to give it a chance to be able to live side by side. Okay, how's that? Good. Now, and just a little bit of the rice pilaf. Just to make sure that everybody's sort of doing right. How's that? Good. All right. Now, that's that dish, but it doesn't stop there, because you've got to move from that into the flat area. That's the upstanding one. Now, what about the flat one? Well, this is the flat. This is the London broil, and this is a great steak, by the way, to be able to use from this point. It's got low fat in it. Drain any surplus fat that there is in the pan from the pan, dust it out with the paper, you know how I do it, and then take a certain amount, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 cups of this dealcoholized wine here, and then stir it off the bottom so as to get the residue of those meat residues off the bottom and into the wine. Just get that heated up for a moment. And then just a little arrowroot. Now this is where you're going for the little tiny sauce at the end. About 2 tablespoons full of the wine. Might as well keep the wine going. If you don't want to use wine, just the same as before, you can use stock instead. And when you've got it like this, you just simply withdraw it from the pan, always withdraw it from the pan, and throw it, move it around quickly, very quickly, so that it doesn't form those lousy little dumplings, which can ruin the whole thing. Shake the pan, a little bit of parsley on the top. Gosh, that looks nice. All right, so there's your sauce. It's all ready to be able to anoint the whole thing. Okay, let's have a look at and see how you carve this. You simply take diagonal slices through with a London broil. You carve it diagonally. You see how that looks? And you just carve that through there, nice and pink, perfectly done. And there is a very thin, flat slice on the plate. Now, see how this looks against this. See how it covers about the same amount of plate size, about the hand. Well, then all you need to do is to take a little of this sauce and just pour that sauce over the and don't cover the whole thing. Let me show you what this looks like now. If you finish this dish off by putting a little of the sauce, that deglazing, over the top. Now, doesn't that look great? All right, I'll give you just a touch. All right, let's have a go. Let's walk down the aisle here. Oh, I need to just a little bit of broccoli, you see, to go in here as well. Doesn't that look nice? Remember, fill the plate up with things that you absolutely love when you're cutting down on the meat side. Looks good. All right, this is what I did here. I actually did the casserole dish so that I have a large piece of meat and I can get into it with a knife and fork, 2-ounce piece. Here was the big prime rib, about 8 ounces. I've got a 3.5-ounce piece here of the flank, and that looks really super. Here I had the tenderloin, a 7-8 ounce tenderloin, and here I've got a 2-ounce tenderloin sat up to give you some visual height on it. So, how's that? Don't forget, one of the really important things of this one is to measure the meat and think of the vegetables. When you cut down on meat, you can just spend all you like on vegetables and still save an awful lot of money. All right, here are the 2 dishes. Let's compare these 2 together for numbers. Let's go. All right, now here, there's the one that we've done. There is the prime rib. Now, I must say that a prime rib would normally be, well, let's face it, 10 ounces or 12 ounces, something like that. And that is a lot of meat, and much more than these numbers. But I've taken the conservative 8 ounce. That's 709. This is what we do with it. We cut it over half, 305. Fat was 34, down to 8 total. Saturated fat was 13, down to 3. Percentage of calories from fat then is not 43, but 22%. Love it. Oh boy, I love this when it goes like this. Cholesterol, 181 down to 58. And sodium, 171 down to 80. Listen to all those down statements here. Dietary fiber, 5, and it's gone up to 6. I'll tell you, if you are somebody who likes meat, and you said a husband likes meat and family likes meat, there's no real reason why not to actually get down to it with a piece of London broil like this. It is very tender. It's got great flavor. And, if you don't like the wine, then, as I said, use the beef stock. But give yourself a little bit of a glaze. And the flavor of the wine is in there too. If you like meat, you can still enjoy it and cut right back on the portion size. That'll minimize the risk and boost the flavor to the ceiling, all right? And save you a lot of money at the same time. Until then, God bless you. Look forward to the next program. Bye. welcome to Graham Care's Kitchen. It's really 2 programs in 1. This is a series that appeals to your creative side. Food that is sumptuous stuff. How could that be? This is a program about people who want to eat healthy and reduce calories. Actually, it's about food with an aromatic quality that fills the nose. Oh, sure. But it's also about keeping my arteries clean by reducing fat. But it doesn't mean a thing if the food isn't rich and colorful. Maximize the flavor. Okay, but I must have healthy food that I can cook in minutes. I must minimize the risk. So welcome to Graham Care's Kitchen, where we get our heads together just for you. And it really is just for you. That's the whole purpose for this whole, bit of effort that we do. There'll be a basic technique, if you haven't watched this before, and I'll wrap a little recipe around that, and then we go on from that to a major, big, wonderful, well, it's not that big, really. A nice dish where I actually use the basic technique and then kind of springboard into using it for those purposes. Now, today, I'm fascinated by this particular subject. It's really when you've got a piece of meat like this, and people say to me, Graham, what would you do to do the greatest difference to my diet, my way of life, my health, risks, etc.? What would you do? And I said, well, what you could do, says me having taken blue, I mean, you've never seen a piece of blue meat before, but anyway, what I would do, I'd say cut that in half, all right? Cut the piece of meat in half. If you normally put 6 ounces of meat, then you actually cut it in half, put 3 ounces. And add to that some grains or rice or seeds, some means or beans, some means of adding on the rest of the plate something that's really attractive that you like, that that doesn't have fat in it, all right? So halve what you know does have fat in it, and add the rest of the things you like, which doesn't have fat in it. Okay, so that's what this is today. It's an extender. It just means taking a little bit of protein and making it into a marvelous dish. And I'm going to do that, first of all, with a time-honored idea with a little chicken and make a pilaf, all right, with rice. Come on, I'll show you how it's done. Got lots to do, so off we go. 1 teaspoonful, and you might have noticed I use so little oil and fats. It's really not necessary to sort of throw it in. And wind the heat up underneath that, and I've got just here 8 ounces of chicken. Now, the chicken is off one side of a bird. Now, I mean, I don't want to make a fetish out of this, but you'll notice there's dark meat there and white meat as well. And whilst it's cooking, let me show you. If you take a regular chicken, or even an irregular chicken, I suppose, and cut through the breast and carve the knife down so that you take the breast off, you've got this as breast meat, and of course you've got this as the leg meat. Now that, when you trim it all off, is 8 ounces. From a 3.5-pound bird, you get about, 1 pound of meat. So what I'm going to do is, instead of using the 1 bird for 4 people, I'm going to use half the bird for 4 people. Thereby, I've halved the amount of food which could have any fat in it at all. Right, put that to one side. By the way, the trimming of the fat content is this. So all of that could have gone into a dish if you were roasting it or casseroling it and leaving the skin on, we've got rid of that as well. So that's an added plus factor. All right, this is stirred around, so you actually need to cook this for about 5 to 6 minutes. And in 5 or 6 minutes' time, the protein will coagulate through. The internal temperature is about 165, and you've done it. It must go above 140 in order to be able to kill any potential little lurky germs that you don't really want to have. All right, let me show you the onion. In this case, the onion is simply cut into small dice. And I'd like to make a point whilst I'm doing this for you. You just cut it down there, and it's got the natural, the natural way that an onion goes is this way. So when you cut down across the leaves of the onion, then all you have to do is cut it that way, and you've got nice little dice. You see, I think that a lot of people in been sold a strange statement, which is make as much time as you possibly can for yourself by using a lot of ingredients that don't require any time or skill or anything at all, such as dried onion flakes. Excuse me. So I'm sure that if I was north of Alaska somewhere and, the Huskies had gone on strike, it might be a reason for actually doing this. Keep stirring the chicken, by the way, and keep it going. But I've tried using this, and I'm sorry, and if you make it, I apologize but if I sound as if I'm critical, but I don't like it. I like to be able to take a knife and about 30 seconds and actually come up with real onion. It really makes a lot of difference. All right, this chicken, let's make that assumption for a moment. That's gone through the 6 minutes so I can get it out of the pan. And this is one of the pans that I have that don't have funny handles to hang on to, so I have to hang on to it with that. Swirl it all round and then out onto the plate. Good. Now I've got the meat juices left behind here, and I don't want to waste those at all. Just put just a little soupçon of oil in there so as to get the natural volatile oils of the onion out, and just shoot those in on top. And I need a whole large onion in the dish, so there's the other side. I bore you with the other bit. And that is going. Now I'm going to just throw into, to cook at the same time as the onions, this Louisiana long grain rice. And that's any long grain rice will do, really. And just stir it in so that what juices there are from the chicken and that oil, and now just coating it, and the onion can cook through at the same time as beginning to